Does anybody remember what they've said this morning? Do you remember what you've said? I have another question for you. Do you know what you're saying? Sometimes we can remember what we've said, but we don't really realize what we're saying. And that's what I want to talk to us about. In Colossians, the 4th chapter, in the King James, it says, "Let your speech be always with grace." Now, last week, what did we talk about last? What did we share with you last week? There was one word that stood out. What was it? Anybody here? Mercy. Thank you. Mercy. Does anybody know what mercy is? Mercy is not getting what you deserve. That's mercy. Well, you know what grace is? I'm sorry. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace is getting what you don't deserve. That's what grace is. It's getting, we don't deserve God's grace. That's God, what God has done for us. We don't deserve, that's grace. It's grace. Then it says, "Season with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man." Season with salt. Does anybody ever use salt? You like salt? Salt. Season with salt. Salt is what? Salt is tasty. So our speech should be of good taste. Salt. Salt is used to preserve what? From corruption. So if we want to translate really what this scripture is saying, it would be this right here. Our speech should be that which is not tasteless, speech that has good taste, that tastes good, and let me start again. I'm sorry. Let me just pray. Just right off the bat, You ever get up and you just feel like all of a sudden you just run into a wall? Well, that's the way the enemy will do you sometime. I'm just going to rebuke him, and we're just going to go on. We're going to start all over. Okay, I didn't say all what I said, okay? But you know what it's about. You remember, okay, the scripture. But the translation here means our speech should be that which is not tasteless or repulsive to the hearer, but should do what? Give life to all. So the things that we say, the speech that we have should be something that lifts people, that encourages people. It should not be something that is tasteless, something that turns them away from what you are saying. Some things that we say, you see what they do is it turns people off, and it doesn't give life to them. And if we turn people off, we're not going to be able to give them life. They're not going to listen to what we have to say, even if it's the truth, even if it's good. So I was looking at a book a few years ago, and there was an article. It was a Reader's Digest, and there was an article in there, and the title of it was Gestures. Gestures. And in there, have you ever used this, done this? What does that mean? Okay. So in America, that's what that means, in the United States. In Bangladesh, new parliament, legislators reacted with fury when the shipping manager came in, and what he did is he gave that sign. They asked him a question, and he answered with that sign. Well, they just become irate because back then, that doesn't mean, with them, it didn't mean okay. What it meant was it was a taunt that was equivalent to where it wasn't very good. We'll just put it that way. It's something that was very vulgar. And because of that, they were offended. See, that man, he didn't know what he was saying. He didn't know what he was saying to them. Richard Nixon was vice president. He greeted a crowd in Latin America with the sign, okay. That also was an insult to them. It was not okay to do that. The victory sign, y'all know what that means? It means victory, doesn't it? Anybody ever have victory? You see them out there in football game, it's victory, victory. Or it could mean peace. Well, you can't just use that anywhere. It doesn't mean peace, and it doesn't mean victory. What happened was England was in a fight years ago with the French, or French with the English. And in battle, what happened is about 650 years ago. In battle, they were overcome and they cut the fingers off. The fingers because of they couldn't shoot a bow and arrow. And so every time that they would be victorious, they would taunt the enemy by putting up their two fingers they had. And so when that was done, it was like an insult to people. So it continued on. To us, a tapping of the forehead, what does that mean to us? Smart. Smart. You know what it means in Holland? Crazy. Crazy. So you better watch if somebody does you that way, because they might be thinking in Holland. Circling of the forefinger to the ear, like we just did. In America, that sign means what to us? Crazy. But in Argentina, you know what it means? You know what it means? You have a phone call. See how different it is? And it depends upon, a lot of times, the receiver. The receiver, too. Maybe none of these you say, well, I don't want to do none of these. I'm just going to stick my hands in my pocket. I'm not going to do anything at all. Well, in Indonesia, France, and Japan, what you're telling people is, I don't want to hear what you have to say. So if you're here and you don't want to hear what somebody has to say, just put your hands in your pocket. Maybe they'll remember my sermon. No. But do you know what you're saying? I just wanted to throw those things out. Do we really know what we're saying sometimes when we say what we say? Do we know? Do you know what you're saying when you repeat what someone else says? In other words, you hear somebody else say something, and then you repeat what they say. Do you know what you're saying? Do you? We very carelessly sometimes repeat what others say, what they say to us, or what's on TV, or what's on the radio, or what's in magazines. We repeat it. Matthew 12:36 in the NIV says, "But I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken." Every careless word they have spoken. That's an interesting thought. If we read that and we think about that, we're going to have to give account of every careless word that we have spoken. There was this a young boy, and his mom told him to do something one day. And, well, Doyce had been at his grandfather's house and spent a few days with him. And when she told him what she wanted him to do when he had come back, his reply was, "I don't want to. You can just go to blank." Well, Doyce that day learned that you need to know what you're saying before you say it. You need to understand what you're saying, because there might be something that follows it that might remind you. There might be a problem. There might be a reason. There might be something else that will speak to you. I thought it was okay because what? I love Grandpa. And Grandpa said it, so it was okay for me to say it. But it wasn't okay. When we repeat what we're told, sometimes we don't realize the effect that it has on other people. Things we say, just little things, maybe just and slide, but we need to think about what we say before we say it. We need to think about what we repeat that other people say when we repeat it. Johnny Carson was jokingly one time in an audience. Y'all remember Johnny Carson? He was jokingly, and what he did is he told everybody that there was a shortage of toilet paper. Well, you know what happened the next day? Stores sold out of toilet paper. And it created a shortage in a certain area because of something that was said just in passing. We don't realize the effect that it has. As a matter of fact, scientists have told us that the in space, if a word is spoken, that word travels forever and travels forever. And years on down the road, you could be standing on Saturn and you could hear that sound if it came your way. You believe that? It's true. That's what scientists say. But you know what? That happens right here. It does. One day, you know what I did? This was years ago. When I first came here, I was just a dumb bunny and I'd do weird things. But one time, I was talking with an individual, and I had noticed in the church that people were saying this and saying this and saying this, and they'd say about this, and I'd hear it go here, 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 here. You go down here, and when it got down here, it wasn't exactly what it would be, but it implied certain things. And I thought, that's strange how all that works. And so this individual who didn't know who it is, and to this day doesn't know who it is, I told them something that wasn't true. And I told them, I said, I want you to just keep that in confidence. Don't say anything. A day and a half, it came back to me. A day and a half. So words that you say, you need to be careful what you say, because it might not just stop right here where you think it stopped, but things we say, it's like an arrow that has been shot. There's no way an arrow is going to stop until it hits something. And if it hits the right place, it could be dangerous. And that's the way words are. Words are the very same way. Calamity will follow calamity. Rumor will follow rumor. That's Ezekiel 7:6. Psalms 41:6 says, they visit me as if they are friends, but all the while they gather gossip, and when they leave, they spread it everywhere. Proverbs 20:19 says, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much. Three things that when we should ask ourselves before we repeat something someone else has said to us. One is, do you know for a fact that what was told you is the truth? Do you know for a fact that what has been told you is true? Number two, even if it is true, does it demoralize or does it tear down someone? In other words, what I heard, if I tell it, is it going to bring somebody down, or is it going to demoralize, or do I just need to be quiet and just trust? Number three, how would you feel if if it was me, or if it was you, and someone was talking about you, and you heard it repeated and come back around to you? How would you feel? How would you feel? Do you know what you're saying? Do you know what you're saying when you say, I'm a Christian? Do we know what we're saying? Luke 6:43-45 says, for a good man bringeth forth not corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree is known by his own fruit. For of thorns men do not gather figs, nor of bramble bush gather they grapes. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh. My grandfather, I love my granddad. I used to spend quite a few times with him out when I was out of school in the summer. And I had some uncles that were not a whole lot older than I am. My grandparents had, I think it was like 11 children, and it spread all the way out real far. And so some of the younger ones wasn't all that, maybe 7 or 8 years older than I am. And so they were older than I was, so I would go out and we would do things together and have fun together. But I was a little guy, and I always thought a lot of them, and whatever they said, I'd do. It's one of those things like that. And so Marlon and Don were out there one time, and they say, come on out here, Doyce. We want you to help us. Says, Papa, they call him Papa. Papa's got, he has a fruit tree. And we want to get some fruit from this tree, and we want to eat it. And it's peaches. And I thought, man, this is good. And so they took me out back, and there was this tree, sure. And he says, the only thing about these peaches, they're not normal peaches. They're little miniature peaches. But boy, when you bite into them, man, they are so good. So good. And I said, okay. He said, but we can't get up in that tree. We're too big. We'll break those limbs off. We're going to put you up there. If you get up there and you'll pick some for us and we'll give you a bag and you bring them down, we'll have some. I said, well, sure. So we said, we'll watch for you if you fall. And they put me up in the tree, and so I got the bag, was put them in there like that. And I climbed down. They got me down. They pulled it out, and they started to eat one. They said, no, Doyce, no, you were so good to climb up. We're going to let you have the first one. And so I said, all right, man. I said, let me have two. I took one, I stuck them in my mouth, I bit down on them, and my mouth went. You know why? They were persimmons, and they were not ripe at all. Not at all. The problem is sometimes we say we are peach trees, and we have persimmons hanging from our limbs. And we're making the world pucker because of what's hanging on our limbs. There was we're getting ready to have a Bible, what do you call it, a Bible challenge here. And it's going to be with our children and our youth. And they've been studying in the Bible different things. And what they're going to do on a Sunday night, you'll see it in your bulletin. Sunday night, they're going to challenge each other and answer questions like a game show. And I think it'll be something you'll really enjoy to hear our youth and our children be able to put forth. But there was a story that I read that there was this quiz team, and they were real outstanding. And what they had to do is they took the book of Romans, and they read through it, and they were going to be asked questions about the book of Romans. Well, when they went through, they did real well. They did real well in the district. They won. Then they did real well in the state. They won. And then they went to nationals, which was in Florida. And from what I remember, in Florida, they went to this motel, and they were supposed to answer all the questions. Well, they won nationals. Well, that night, when they went to bed and everybody was asleep, they got up and snuck out. And they went downstairs into the motel room and just tore up a bunch of things and came back upstairs. And when I read that story, I jotted it down and kept that story. But what's interesting about that is see, they had all these scriptures. They knew what they were. They'd read them. They knew what Romans was. But it wasn't in here. We can read and read and read, but unless it's in our heart, unless it's something that we are living, we have to live it. It has to come out. That has to bear the right fruit. You may think, Luke 6, it says, a good man out of the treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. You may think no one notices what you're saying is different than the life you're living, but they do. Did you know that? They might not say, well, you're not, that's not right. You say you're a Christian, but you're living this way. I had in a situation when I worked in a grocery store, somebody tell me that. I thought you were a preacher. Same thing. But he didn't know the truth. What it was is I cut meat, and the supervisor had come in, and we had quarter loins to sell, and it was center cut. They're supposed to sell the center cut for like $1.19, I think, of a pork loin. But it wasn't true. And that person realized what had happened is, what they did is they sold the end. They sold a quarter loin, a whole quarter. They cut the center out and made fillets out of them and laid them down on a tray and made money on that. And then they put it together. They cut out all the good pieces of meat. Well, my supervisor come to me and asked me to do that, and I wouldn't do that. But this person did not know, and they knew it was being done, and that's what they said to me about that. But anyway, what happened was, it happens to us is a lot of times people see things and they watch and they realize that unless we're bearing the fruit that we say we are, they're not going to hear you. They're not going to hear you. It's like there were 3 little boys. They were out in the sort of the slum area, and a little puppy came up, and the little puppy, they walks up to them, and they were arguing over who was going to get the puppy. All 3 of them wanted it. And one little boy, he says, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Whoever can tell the best lie, he can have the puppy. Well, that's great. They high-fived each other. And so this one boy, he started telling this story, and all of a sudden this minister comes walking up. And he says, young men, what are you doing? He says, I heard you say that you were going to tell lies. He says, it is wrong to tell lies. You're not supposed to tell lies. It's a sin. It's something that's wrong. And when I was a young boy, I never told a lie. I would never do something like that. Well, the little boy walked over and he picked up the dog. He says, we're going to give him the dog. See, the world knows, the world sees. We may not think they do. We may think because they're living the way they are, they don't recognize certain things, but they do. People won't hear what you say until they see what you're doing. It is what you are saying. What you're doing is what you are saying. Number 4, let me ask you the 4th question here, and the last question is this. Do you know what you're saying according to other people's ears? In other words, do you realize that maybe what you're saying might not be understood? Might not be understood. James said that in James 1:19. It says, dear friends, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Why would you be quick to listen and slow to speak? So that you could be correct, so that you wouldn't say wrong things, so that you could think about what you're saying before you say, or do what you're going to do before you do it, and measure it, and feel the effect, and think the effect that it's going to be, instead of just, here's what happens is, we've grown up in a world that just says what they want to. We've grown up in a world that if they always say what they feel, and they feel like that's just my right. I can say what I want to. It might be your right in one sense, but if you're if you're being a Christian and trying to obey God the best you can, you'll realize you can't just say things. You can't be like the world and respond in certain ways. It's like there was this young man who, his father, for graduation, gave him a new, a Ferrari GTO. And he took it out for a ride. And he went out on the street, and he was driving it, and of course peeling the tires, and had a big motor in it. He'd go real fast. And this old gentleman come riding up in his moped beside him and looked at him. And the young boy looked over at him, a little old man. He said he looked like he was about 100. That's how old he was. Beard and just, put. And he leaned over and he said, Sonny, he says, that's a pretty car. He says, yeah, it's pretty fast too. He says, yeah. He says, you mean it'll go real fast? Oh, yeah, it'll go real fast. And I paid $500,000 for it. A little bragging, He says, you mind if I look inside? No, go ahead. And he leaned over and he said, man, this is beautiful. He says, this is really nice. And he leaned back over on his moped. He said, but you know what? He says, I think I'll just keep my moped. Well, the young man, he was upset. He said, well, he's just trying to show off and be smart. I'll show him. So as soon as the light changed, smoke boiling right in the guys in the moped. And he's going down the road. All of a sudden, he looks in his mirror and he sees a spot. And the spot's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And sure enough, it's that guy on that moped coming after him, right behind him. And all of a sudden, whoosh, he went by him. He said, what in the world? He said, what was that? He didn't realize it was a moped at that time. What was that? And so he gunned it again. He got up closer and he saw, well, that's that guy on a moped. He said, how did he pass me up? So he sped up faster, went faster, 100-something miles an hour, was going down the road and took off and passed him up. And all of a sudden he looked in his mirror again, and here come the little guy on a moped right behind him. And again, well, he gunned it again and went past him. Come behind him. And he saw, here he come behind him again. And all of a sudden, bam, he run into the back of his car. And the guy jumped out. He runs. He says, are you okay? Are you okay? He says, is there anything I can do for you? He said, yeah. He said, yeah. He said, unhook my suspenders off your side mirror. The young man thought his Ferrari GTO was being beat by a moped. Sometimes things aren't perceived or understood the way they really are. And that's why we need to be careful. And what happens is when that person doesn't perceive what has been said by you and says it different, and we get upset because and it creates division there. I know what I said is the question we need to ask. I know what I said, but do they know what I said? Do they know what? You might think about that one. It's important we know what we are saying. How important? Matthew 12, 36 and 37 says, but I tell you that men will have to give an account. I just read that scripture, didn't I? On the day of judgment for every careless word. You say, it's extremely important. Sometimes I think we talk too much. Most people talk too much. There's some that don't talk enough, but most people talk too much. They say things that they shouldn't say and that they don't need to say. They just need to be quiet. True story, I read this when I believe I was in high school. There was a lady who had a baby. She was taking the baby to see her parents for the first time. She got on a train, rode up north where it was real cold, snow and ice. The conductor came through and said, listen, when you get off, he says, at your stop, let me know where your stop is. So ring the buzzer or whatever so that I can stop, because we don't stop at every stop if we don't have someone. And everybody and this man leaned over this lady beside him with a baby and says, I'll help you know where it's at. I'll help you know. Well, the train went on down, stopped, and stopped again, and the man says, this is your stop. She got off, went off the train, left. The train took off. About 3 hours later, they stopped again. The conductor came back and asked, where's the lady that was here? He says, oh, she got off at her stop. He says, that wasn't her stop. We were just having some trouble with the train, so we stopped. And, of course, they went back and found out that the lady and the baby itself had frozen to death. The young lady, first of all, she didn't hear the right thing, but she took for granted that was the way it was. It's important we know what's being said to us, and it's important what we say. The man that said that, can you imagine what it would be to carry that? But what about some of the things that we have said to people that have done just as bad, maybe, or maybe even worse? There's a voice speaking here, I believe, this morning, and that voice is saying something to us. The voice is this. What's it saying to us? What's this voice saying to you right now? It's important you know what is being said to you. That's what I've been talking about. And it's important to know what we say. Right now, it's important to try to understand what God is saying to you. And it's important to know what you are to say to God. Romans 3:20 says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and sup with him and he with me. In the church in Houston, Texas, that Suzanne and I were married in, which was at the college, there's a big stained glass window that stood back here. And it was a picture, and if you look, you could see it was Jesus knocking on the door. Beautiful stained glass window. And you say, well, come on in, come on in. Well, it's not that way. You see, there was no door handle because you have to open that door for him to come in. You have to open the door. And it's not just saying it, but it's something within the heart. You have to do it. You have to open that door inside and respond. Time and time again, I believe God's knocked on people's doors, and they won't open the door of their heart that he might come in. this morning, I believe He's knocking on someone's heart. And He's saying, like the song we sang, I love you. I love you. Are you hearing what He's saying? Are you interpreting what He's saying to you? How are you going to reply to what He's saying? Let's stand.